Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my review of Blood West. I've been playing this in the 1.0 branch because it's going full release and it's going to coincide with this video going up. Front loading the information. It is worth your time. It is worth your money. This is a really fun, difficult in the best way, in a rewarding way kind of game. The whole theme, everything works and it's kind of unique. I don't want to call it a stealth game, because people who hate stealth games, for the correct reasons, mind you, I think there's problems with the stealth genre, will immediately yeet out of here. So we will get into it, but what I would like to say is this is what stealth games should be. This is innovative and a bit more new stealth, new wave. We'll unpack it, but suffice it to say, this is a good stealth game in a world where the stealth genre is honestly kind of still finding its feet decades on. Also at the top, look, I joke about being a reluctant reviewer, but I think this is going to become my tag at this point, because I don't relate to any of these reviewers these days who want to write essays and flowery words, and they're more interested in their, writing skills than actually just being a gamer talking to gamers, which is what I am. I'm just some bogan with a microphone. The only sort of objective constraint that I have is for every $5 that I throw to the developer, it better give me an hour of solid, clean gameplay. It's a pretty low bar to pass, but it's my bar. And that's on the developer to price their game accordingly. So in this particular case, Blood West is retailing for $36.50 Australian, which is about 7.5 hours gameplay. So I put that time in and I loved every second of it. So look, there's your formalities out of the way. What is Blood West? Blood West is one of those occult, Weird West sort of genres. You've got your 6-shooter on your side and you're fighting bloody monsters and zombies and that. It's really eerie. It's really well done. The background ambient music doesn't really have any huge overtures or themes or anything like that, but all the music just is a value add. It's eerie. It's unsettling. I wouldn't call this horror, in the same way that I wouldn't necessarily call a Resident Evil game horror, right? Like it's built within a horror element, monsters, gruesome gore, zombies, that sort of stuff. But I would be loath to say that Resident Evil, one of my favorite series of all time, is actually scary for most people. It really isn't. It's not like an Outlast or something that's really trying to scare your pants off. So the same thing goes here. It's set in a horror setting, an eerie setting, but it's not scary. Apart from the fact that it's very high time to kill. I suppose the moment to moment can get scary, but not as far as the horror element. So you're kind of just working through these general areas, trying to find bloody MacGuffins for a totem that talks to you from beyond the pale. The story is vague, but interestingly, and I don't want to give away what little there is, but as you bring back these little artifacts and give them to the totem and the voice actors are all hamming it up, chewing up the scenery, which is great. You want to see that. My hate for voice actors is well documented, how they fancy themselves celebrities and use the gaming industry as a stepping stone to bigger and better things. I like voice actors that absolutely chew up the script and they're screaming in the booth and just being wild and insane, and that's plenty of that going on in here. Serious, but not self-serious. Anyway, the totem, as you give him the MacGuffins that you go into the different areas and biomes, he explains, oh, well, this, drove the dudes mad, and then they went looking for the other thing, and, there's a skeleton of a story, but that's all that we need in a game like this. All that matters is the moment to moment, but the story, what little there is, it holds together well. It is as value add as you could hope for. The moment to moment of this game is where it shines. It's doing some really innovative stuff. Innovative in the same way, like ahead of its time, like a trailblazer. For example, this might be a bit of a stretch for some of the younger blokes, or actually, to be honest, for most. When Demon Souls first came onto the scene, I'm not talking about the recent remake, and I'm not talking about Dark Souls, the one before it, the absolute prototype proof of concept game. Really interesting. The first time you'd seen any of these mechanics, the only way anyone over here in the West played it was like I had to go buy it in some back alley shithole video game store, had to get like a Japanese import version, a lot of hoops to jump through. And even when I played it, half of it I was like, this is really interesting, and half of it I was really against. But that's the thing with innovation and being ahead of your time, is that you bring mechanics that challenge the status quo, and they might make you a bit uncomfortable. So I feel like that's what's going on here. This game's actually quite brilliant in what it's doing, and it might even take years before people truly appreciate how clever it is and how well it's addressing the problems with the stealth genre. I'll just expound upon that really quickly. Stealth genres I generally dislike because what they ultimately are is a pseudo-linear experience. If you want to break it down into the fundamental building blocks, you'll come across an arena and there might be 2 or 3 ways to navigate through your Splinter Cell-esque thing, your left or right path. This is all obfuscated by boxes and stuff, but I'm talking about broad design philosophy. There's a couple of ways through. You have to go through the specific timings of the different guard movements or whatever, but like there is, in a way, there is a hidden path that you need to divine, and if you stray from that path, you die. Or you game over, or you get caught, hands up, whatever, you go back, you get an end game thing. So it is follow the very precise stealth path that you can't see and you have to trial and error, and every time you fuck up, we're going to send you back to the beginning. This has been the cornerstone of most stealth games for decades, and it's terrible. What we're seeing is a modernization of it where stealth is a component. It is an opener to a sequence, which makes sense. Think of all your Hollywood movies, your spy thriller novels, all your James Bond crap and all that. It's never clean because it's not interesting. You don't just stealth in, get the thing, and stealth out and call that an entertaining piece of media, because that's what this is, right? I'm not actually trying to simulate a very high-functioning stealth dude that never ends up in a movie because he's fucking boring because he's so competent. Every stealth thing ever starts with stealth and ends with fucking explosions and everything going wrong. So understanding stealth is that it's not a genre, not really. It's a component of an experience. And you see that. Examples, Metal Gear Solid V. Great example. You cruise around, you try and stealth dudes out, but then when you get compromised, it turns into a bit of run and gun action until you finish the scenario or whatever, and then you try again at the next outpost. It's good. Stealth's part of it. Another one, XCOM 2. I know it's a really different genre, but the opening is ambush guerrilla tactics. You set up your kind of ambush and stealth around and you pull the trigger, but then after that first round and the damage and the payoff happens, it turns into a different gameplay loop. This does the same thing. However, the brilliance is that the stealth is really difficult to get right, and if you mess the stealth up, the gameplay loop after that is frenetic, terrifying, very high lethality, and I wouldn't say it punishes you, but because it is very difficult to reliably go loud, you are highly incentivized to make the most of the stealth. And I think this weird back-to-front gameplay design, or whatever you would like to call it, is the key to what makes this game brilliant. Okay, so look, we'll go through the encounter so you can understand how it works. At the outset, there is very gamey, and there's nothing wrong with having gaming mechanics in a game. If you make everything high immersion, high realism, like this is the problem the West is having with their character designs. They're trying to make everyone, look realistic. But I don't want to play a game that has my fucking ugly head on it. And I doubt anyone else wants to look at my big, ugly, bloody, boring face. So realism is not necessarily the answer when you're talking about fantastical escapism. But again, a huge other tangent. My point is, having very gamified mechanics front and center is often a good thing, as long as it's adding to the experience. The immersion doesn't come from, oh, that mechanic's not realistic. The immersion comes from the flow state that you find yourself in. When you're moving around, you have a little bar at the bottom of your screen and it sort of just expands out. I'm using my hands. I don't know how else to describe it, but it just expands out. It's a detector. It's like the light and sound detector and all that, but it's very mechanically overt. We've seen this in other games, but the sound and visual detection of enemies is actually kind of small in the scheme of things. What that means is once you start to get the rhythm of this game, you actually sprint around a lot from place to place, from encounter to encounter. And you can, generally speaking, just sprint along. And as soon as you see the meter flash up that you might be creating audio, the game is telling you, essentially, you're walking into an encounter. It might be a guy behind a wall next to you or something, So you just sprint from encounter to encounter and then you go into stealth space. I'm making a big deal of this because it is a big deal. It might seem like a small thing, but it's something that compounds and creates huge problems with flow in games. And if you're in a crouch stealth position, I kind of hate crouching in games. I hate stealthing. It's slow. It's boring. You know, if I wanted boring, I'd work, as an actuary behind a desk. I don't want to be crouched 90% of the time. And so this seemingly little thing is actually huge in that you spend probably most of your time running around being noisy, but the game kind of overtly tells you, hey, time to switch on, time to go into crouch and stealth. Big deal, I think. From there, you can go for melee, which is pretty black and white. But the interesting thing is more of the ranged component. Now, your guns, even though they're loud, I mean, you've got bows and that as well. You can throw tomahawks, all sorts of cool, period-appropriate things. But generally speaking, the cone of audio that your weapons make isn't super big. So much so that, like, there are encounters that you will have to triage and go, these three dudes are going to hear me. I'm going to have to figure out how I deal with that. But generally speaking, it's not a huge consideration how loud your gun is. Not really. Again, very gamey. These smaller, more compact environments. Interestingly, headshots are king. Headshots are all that matter. If you're landing body shots, you're doing it wrong. You have to click heads. Now, I don't actually care for things like CSGO or anything like that. I'm not a headshot dude. I don't enjoy that as a mechanic, as a gameplay loop. However, it works really well here. Also, the game doesn't fudge hitboxes or anything like that. Not like what you were probably used to. So it's going to take you a while to get good at landing the headshots. But just like the whole XP curve of a Dark Souls type game, the more you play this, the more of an absolute bean machine you will become and start landing those headshots. And it's really, really satisfying. So the hitboxes are actually quite small. They're quite specific. Your gun sways a bit, but you can level up and offset that. But in the beginning, don't be disheartened that you're not going to be landing headshots that often. You will get better. But the key is headshots. And so essentially that's how you stealth around. You stealth around and you bean dudes. You put rounds in their heads. The reload times are intentionally really, really long, and it just adds to the sort of stress pressure cooker situation when it goes wrong or when you aggro other dudes. So if you shoot a dude in the collarbone by accident or something like that, and then he's on you, all of a sudden now you're in this sort of high-paced environment. They close on you, the lethality is high, dudes that shoot at you do not reload, and their bullets hit really hard. Dudes that melee you will kill you in like 2 hits. It is really brutal. And in that 10-second window, because you're not going to really last longer than that, you have to unload your rounds, but you can't just mag dump, not until you unlock like fanning on your pistol at a super high level. Generally speaking, the reload time and the refire time is really, really long. So you are all of a sudden under incredibly high pressure to keep landing headshots. Because that same dude that you missed the headshot on, and it would have been an instant kill, he's probably going to take 4 body shots to kill. And you physically won't be able to get the 4 body shots in before he kills you. So I realize that this might actually sound like unpleasant or unfun. It's not. It's incredibly stressful in the best kind of way. And again, it emphasizes the get good of land those frigging headshots no matter what. And the payoff and the panic of trying to land those shots when you go into the second phase, when you've aggroed the enemies and they're coming hard at you, there is nothing like it, and it screams Hollywood panic encounters as well. Something that I kept thinking of was Bone Tomahawk, which, yes, a Western, thematically a bit different, but you could probably say an eerie, weird West horror, dare I say. But the same kind of thing. The lethality of, like, I don't want to give that movie away. You should watch it. It's one of the greatest movies of all time, especially that one scene. Ugh. Anyway, but like, I enjoy that sort of, there is this weird subgenre of terror in Westerns where your dude only has a window to get off 2 or 3 shots before it's over. And if you can't resolve the problem in 2 rounds, you're dead. Anyway, so that should give you an idea of how the gameplay loop works. One thing I did find is the game seems a little bit, dare I say, bloated. I actually feel that if they cut out a lot of the side content, because it's sort of open world, and it encourages you to go out there and grind and explore. And I didn't necessarily not enjoy going down all the little side areas in the mines. It's really well designed, actually. But you end up over leveling essentially, and then you buy all these power weapons that do special abilities. And by the time I got to the end of, say, Act 1, for example, I'd put many, many hours into that first chapter, and I feel like if there was less level and it had a little bit more of a linear approach, I'm not saying it has to be a linear game, but maybe just cut down some of the side areas a bit, it might have been a tighter experience. In fact, I still remember because there's a big finale, dare I say Bone Tomahawk-esque, in the first act where, I don't want to give it away, but you essentially go into the source of evil and you drill deeper and down, and it becomes a bit of a gauntlet. It switches, it really starts to push your ability to hit those headshots under pressure. But it's actually really, really well-earned, kind of low-scale, but still high-stakes finale, right? As in, like, think a finale in an indie movie as opposed to a bloody Marvel's Avengers. I know I'm dancing around it, but what I'm getting at is you probably could have halved the price of this game and shipped Act 1, and that would be a cool game. Not that there's anything wrong with the following acts, but it's just interesting that I feel like you could have gone either way. Either trim the content for the full multi-act experience, or maybe just own it and just release one act at a time. Kind of reminded me of OG Doom in the shareware first act kind of way. That in a way that stood as its own game, perfectly fine. Anyway, but that's very nitpicky, chucking that on the end. I enjoyed my time with this. It was really good. I would argue this is a game that's not really something I would usually resonate with. And it did take a little while for me to get it. Like, I could feel the fishing reel. I could feel that there was something going on, but it took me probably a couple of hours before I understood what the game was trying to do. Anyway, very innovative, very ahead of its time, very difficult and tricky, but very, very rewarding. Team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.